top intelligence official James Clapper, who said before Congress yesterday that it is likely the Gaddafi regime will prevail in the long run. And did he err by saying that in public? And if so, is this something he needs to be taken to the woodshed for?
He was making a hard-headed assessment about military capability. And I don't think anybody disputes that Gaddafi has more firepower than the opposition. He wasn't stating policy. So let me be clear again about what our policy, as determined by me, the President of the United States, is towards the situation there. I believe that Gaddafi's on the wrong side of history. I believe that the Libyan people are anxious for freedom, and the removal of somebody who has suppressed them for decades now. And we are going to be in contact with the opposition, as well as in consultation with the international community, to try to achieve the goal of Mr. Gaddafi being removed from power. Zachary Goldfarb.
Thank you, Mr. President. You talked about the option of tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Can you walk through which steps or which targets have to be hit before we do that? Oil price, gas price, and how much would you want to release in any particular moment? And secondly, can you talk about, in addition to energy shocks, what are the other 2 or 3 gravest threats to the economic recovery and what your administration is doing about it?
The answer to your first question is no. I will not go through the prices that would trigger the release of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but what I can do is to give you a sense of how historically it's been understood. The idea behind the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is if there was a severe disruption in supply, similar to what happened in the 70s, for example, when you had the OPEC making a decision not to sell for a while. How would our economy continue to function, and making sure that we've got sufficient supplies for that. Another example would be during Hurricane Katrina, when you've got a whole bunch of refineries that have been impacted, and production in the Gulf has been impacted. You know, that's another example where in a short term you can fill that hole. Right now, what we're seeing is not a shortage of supply. Refineries are actually operating at fairly full capacity at the moment. The problem is a great deal of uncertainty in the oil markets. Part of it prompted by the fact that the economy is growing faster in some places than others, but you've got China and India and Brazil and other emerging nations that are using more and more energy as their economies advance. We already saw that trend in 2008. Because of the worldwide recession, oil prices went back down, but to some degree, a lot of what's happening in prices is as a consequence of economic growth. And countries and economies starting to use more oil. Part of it, though, is also uncertainty in terms of what's happening in the Middle East. And so one of the messages that I want to send today is that we are confident about our ability to fill any potential gaps in supply. Libya, for example, does not account for a large portion of overall world production. They provide a type of oil that is highly valued, and there's a high premium on it, but basically, even if Libyan oil production was suspended for a significant period of time because of the unrest there, we'd be able to fill that gap. So a lot of this has to do with uncertainty in the market, and part of what I want to communicate to the market is that we're going to do what we need to do in consultation with both other producer nations as well as in consultation with our allies who also have reserves to make sure that oil supplies remain stable and that economic growth is going to continue. I do want to repeat the point that I've made, though, that look, the American people feel this pretty acutely. Right? I mean, we can talk all we want in the abstract about world oil markets. What they're concerned about is this money out of my pocket. Some of the steps that we've already taken are making a difference, but obviously if you are in a house that requires you to commute 50 miles every day to your job, you're not going to be able to sell your house immediately, particularly in this market, and move closer. You may want to buy a fuel-efficient car, but you may not be able to afford it, and so you're stuck with the old clunker that's getting 8 or 10 miles a gallon. And in fact, a lot of folks who are having the toughest time, who are either unemployed or have low-wage jobs, they're the ones that are most severely affected because they're using a higher portion of their income just to fill up the gas tank. So we're going to try to do everything we can not only to stabilize the market, as I said, to the extent that we see any efforts to take advantage of these price spikes through price gouging, we're going to go after that. If we see significant disruptions or shifts in the market that are so disconcerting to people that we think a strategic petroleum reserve release might be appropriate, then we'll take that step. And we're going to monitor very closely. And obviously we have it teed up. So this isn't a situation where it would take a big bureaucracy and several weeks for us to implement. This is something that would take several days. With respect to the overall economy, I think my assessment and the assessment of most economists is that although gas prices are hurting individuals right now, and obviously taking some of that tax cut that we gave them and forcing them to use it on gas as opposed to buying other items, that in part because of the steps we took, both Democrats and Republicans during the lame duck session, that the economic growth continues in a positive trend. We saw that in the jobs report, which in the private sector at least was better than expected. We've seen the unemployment rate drop a full point. And so overall, I'm positive about the fact that we're moving slowly but surely into positive job growth over the next several months. There are some areas we're still concerned about. Housing is one that I just mentioned. We've got a lot of folks who, because housing prices have fallen so steeply, are still hurting. Some of them are threatened with foreclosure, maybe because they lost a job. In some cases, they want to sell their house so they can move to a new job, and their house is underwater. Essentially, their mortgage is higher than what the house would sell for right now. We have a number of steps to encourage loan modifications, to encourage banks to take steps that would alleviate some of that burden and start clearing some of those homes on the market. But it's a slow process. It's you're talking about $5 trillion worth of product out there. And I mentioned that I had this conversation with Warren Buffett a couple weeks ago when I was giving him the Medal of Freedom, and his point was, look, I'm bullish about this economy. When it comes to the housing market, it just takes some time to work itself out because we had such a housing bubble. We had so much construction, particularly in certain states that are harder hit than others. That was then compounded by the overall recession, and it's going to take some time for the housing market to improve. But we're continuing to take a range of steps to try to strengthen that process of recovery in the housing market. The last point I'll make on the economy overall relates back to the budget issues that we talked about. If you looked at the last jobs report, growth in the private sector, very strong, 222,000 jobs created. Where you lost jobs was in state and local government. And that means teachers being laid off, firefighters being laid off, police officers being laid off. Now, we were able to cushion some of that over the first 2 years of this recession through the Recovery Act, and it made a huge difference all across the country. But now states are continuing to cut, local governments are continuing to cut. I think it's very important when we think about the budget to understand that our long-term debt and deficits are not caused by us having Head Start teachers in the classroom. Our long-term debt and deficit are caused primarily by escalating healthcare costs that we see in Medicare and Medicaid that's putting huge pressure on the overall budget. And that's why I think it's going to be important for us to have a conversation after we get the short-term budget done about how do we really tackle the problem in a comprehensive way.
Is
that
there
means not
any
just going
way
after Head Start
to solve economic issues?
or
Is there any way
Corporation for Public
to
Broadcasting.
solve
That's not
economic
where the money is.
issues?
What
Do
it means is that we've
labor
got
unions
to
have
make
to
sure
close
that
down
we're
their
tackling
powers?
defense spending, we're tackling
Reduce
tax
the-
expenditures and tax
A lot of
loopholes,
don't like that. A lot of people
that
don't
we're
like
tackling
that. How do you fix spending?
entitlements.
How about you?
We're thinking about how do we
Deficits. How do you fix spending?
really get our arms
and the
around those things that
economy.
are driving the debt deficit in a
And
serious
the
way and
deficit,
bipartisan.
well, you bet.
I'll make this the last question.
Can
Sean Roy.
money follow the heart? Are the two
Why don't you get a
separate
microphone
and
so we can hear
apart? Well, I vote for the heart, doing what is right. Sometimes economics bite.
Thank you, Mr. President.